Broken strings are a common occurrence on the harp. They often break in the middle of the night when you're nowhere near your harp. It's important to promptly replace a string when it breaks. Be sure you use a replacement string of the correct gauge. Using an incorrect string is very bad for your harp, and it can even void your manufacturer's warranty. Also, an incorrectly sized string will be much more likely to break when you try to tune it up to pitch. I recommend that you always keep an extra set of strings on hand so that you can replace a string whenever it breaks. There's nothing worse than sitting down to practice and not being able to because you're missing a string and you don't have a replacement. And if you're ever doing gigs, you always want to be sure you have an extra set of strings with you. I also suggest that you keep a small notebook in with your strings. Every time a string breaks, write down which string it was and where it broke, such as up by the bridge pin or down at the eyelet. This information will help you troubleshoot if the same string continues to break. In your notebook, you can also keep track of when you purchase strings. Gut strings, for example, do have a shelf life, and so it's good to know how fresh your strings are. You should have received a stringing list or a string chart when you purchased your harp. If not, contact your harp maker or the store where you bought your harp right away and request one. You can find string lists on our website for many harps, such as Dusty Strings, Lion & Healy, Salvi, and others. If you don't have a string list and you're not sure which string should go on your harp, don't try to fudge it and say something like, well, my harp kind of looks like the one in the picture and it has the same number of strings, so I'll just use these. Do your homework and be sure you know what the right strings are for your harp. Always string your harp with the strings recommended by your harp maker. Be sure to check with them before substituting a gut string for a nylon string or vice versa. Gut and nylon have many different properties and will act differently on your harp. They also will change the intonation of your sharping levers and your pedal discs. There are two common ways that harp makers list their string, either by number or by octave. We'll start with the method used by many lever harp makers, such as Dusty Strings and Triplet, because it's the most straightforward. This is the by number method. The highest, shortest string on a harp is number 1, the next one down is number 2, and then 3, 4, 5, etc. to the bottom of the harp. Look at this string chart for Dusty Strings FH36 harps as an example. The monofilament nylon strings are listed by their gauge, such as .025 or .036, which indicates the thickness of the string measured in thousandths of an inch. The highest strings on this harp, strings number 1 and 2, are each .025 gauge, and numbers 3 through 7 are all .028, etc. When ordering these monofilament strings from us, you'd say,
I'd like a .028 blue string.
Or,
I'd like a .036 clear string.
no matter who made your harp, if you have a stringing chart that shows the monofilament nylon strings in gauges like this, you can order these strings from us. The wound strings on this Dusty Strings harp are numbered 24 through 36. When ordering these strings, you don't need to tell us the gauge. Just say,
I have a Dusty Strings FH36 B harp, and I'd like a number 30 B string.
Always be sure to tell us the number, counting from the top down, and the name of the note. That way we can double check that we send you the right string. We only carry wound strings for the harp makers and models that we sell. If you need a wound string for another maker, please contact that maker directly. The second way that harp makers number their strings is by octaves. This is the way that pedal harps are numbered, as well as lever harps made by Lion & Healy and Salvi. Octaves are always defined with an E on the top and an F on the bottom. For example, middle C is in the 4th octave. The top string of the 4th octave is the E above middle C, and the bottom note of the 4th octave is the F below middle C. The 5th octave would be the 7 strings below that, from an E down to an F, and then this harp has 3 strings in the 6th octave. By the way, the lowest note on a large, full-size pedal harp is the 7th octave C. We'll now go back to our fourth octave that includes middle C with an E on top of the octave and an F on the bottom. The third octave is the 7 strings above that, and then the second octave and the first. Depending on how many strings you have on your harp above middle C, you may not have a complete first octave. For example, this harp does not have the top 2 first octave strings. Many large pedal harps have 4 strings higher than this, the D and the E in the first octave, and 2 additional 0 octave F and G strings. If your harp's string chart uses this octave method of string numbering, you will order your strings by octave. You'd say,
I'd like to order a 4th octave F string.
Or,
I'd like to order a 2nd octave B string.
For the non-wound strings, you'll also need to specify if you'd like nylon or gut. Check our website for the brands of these strings that we carry and for stringing lists for Lion Healy and Salvi harps.